Truth Be Told, a Generation X based fic. Chapter 7, Emma's Story. When I got onto the scene with the others, I was very worried by what I saw. The unknown man was holding Jubilation in a way that appeared threatening, but he had locked eyes with Richard. Yvette was standing next to Richard, obviously worried. The whole scene, however, was so quiet that it was like time had frozen. Since I was nearest to Sean, I had quietly asked him, "What's happening?" I noticed Sean was keeping his eyes on the scene, but I heard him answer me. "I deny, Emma. Richard and Yvette had both stated they heard Jubilee scream, and that they were going to check it out. We all came out, no doubt thanks to the two of them calling everyone. And we all arrived to see this scene. It worried me, since I'm getting this strange vibe about it." I was about to confirm I had a bad feeling about the scene myself, when the man finally spoke, and I actually heard some concern in his voice. "Richard, what are you doing here? Did these mutants abduct you from home?" It was then I started to realize that this man knew Richard, and something started to nag at my mind. Something I heard when Richard was just settling in at the school. I then tried to use the distraction to try and probe the man's mind, and maybe even get him to release Jubilation. Given my experience, I figured it would be easy. I was wrong, however, since just as an initial probing told me something very worrying. I detected an artificial presence shielding parts of his mind. I knew in a matter of moments what it was, and it was horrifying. I turned to Sean and said, "Sean, he's a sentinel, or some sort of hybrid. That doesn't explain, however, how he knows Richard." I then saw Sean's eyes, and realized what had been nagging me. It was nagging at Sean's mind as well, and I realized how bad the situation was. Sure enough, it was that moment that Richard responded to the man, and confirmed my worst fears at the moment. "How can you say something like that? You were always the one saying how all people are equal, and should be treated that way. You are acting like these people are some sort of criminals. I came here by choice, not by force. But why are you here, Bastian? I was told you were dead." While he didn't say the word, I realized this was Richard's uncle. The response that came from the man chilled me to the bone. "Mutants are not people, Richard. They are freaks of nature that should be eliminated." I could both sense and see Jubilation's fear after hearing that. Richard was remaining calm, but I could sense that he was struggling to remain that way. I could even sense Yvette trying to help him. The next words Bastian said, however, threatened to destroy that calm. "No doubt your parents were trying to protect you from the harsh truth. The world needs to be cleansed of them. Now I know you can't be here by choice, since you aren't a mutant." I knew Richard was almost about to lose it at that point. With him most likely holding Yvette's power, I was sure if he let loose, it would not be good. To my relief and horror, he advanced towards the man and responded to the statement, "I am a mutant, Uncle. It was a few days after my ability appeared that I was told that you killed yourself. Now I find out it was a lie to protect me from the worst thing of all. You had always told me to treat people as equals, regardless of what they were. Now I find out you were the biggest hypocrite in the world. I wish you really were dead now." I saw Richard shake his head. The man I saw as a second father would rather see me dead. "Well, if you plan to do anything to them, you'll have to kill me first." I could tell he meant that, and it was only increased by the fact that he stood at attention in front of Bastian and had closed his eyes. At that moment, no one moved at all. They were all too scared to, since they all knew that it would cost Richard and Jubilee their lives. I was scared as well, since this connection between Richard and Bastian was so close. I figured I needed to do something, and the best thing I could do was try to get through to the human part of our attacker. I again tried to scan Bastian's mind. This time I could see the conflict in his own mind. The man was busy arguing with something robotic that looked like him. The images were struggling, and neither appeared to be gaining ground. Finally, I saw the human form look at me, as if he could sense me there. As he did, I heard him talk to me. "Miss Frost, I know who you are. I don't want to kill my nephew. I never knew he was a mutant, or that he was here to begin with. I always did tell him to treat people with kindness, and to strive to make a better world." I saw him face the Sentinel part again, still struggling with it for control. "Now this blasted machine says I have to kill him, that he's a plague to mankind." I could tell that the man who Richard had known was still in there, so I took a chance to reason with him. "Your nephew, like all the students here, come here to learn about their powers, and learn to use them to help instead of harm. Even Jubilation, the girl you first grabbed, came here to do that. All of them want to learn to use their powers to help, and to control them so they don't inadvertently harm someone." I then hoped my statements made their way through to his mind. The struggle I saw in Bastian's mind continued, and then the form that had been human seemed to get the upper hand. He then said to me, "I'm sorry for what I've done. I'm making sure this ends here. Please tell Miss Lee to move away. I don't want her to get injured by what I'm about to do. Also, give my nephew my apologies. I understand if he won't listen now, but he needs to know I did this to make amends." At first, I was a bit confused by the statement, but then I understood when I noticed a panicked look on the part of his mind that was controlled by the Sentinel. Bastian had chosen to really end his life right then and there. I was back viewing the events, and I shouted, "Jubilee, get away now! Everyone else, don't move!" It was barely a moment after the first words left my lips that Jubilee did as she was told. She quickly bolted away from Bastian, and over to where Everett was. Only one person didn't appear to listen to my words. Monet had started to move towards Richard, most likely thinking Richard might be too close to what was about to happen. She had even started to hover, and I psychically ordered, "Child, I told you not to move. Get back or you will be injured." Monet looked at me, and there was a mix of concern and defiance on her face, as if she thought I didn't know what I was doing. She even started to talk back to me. "Miss Frost, Richard—" I cut her off, saying, "Richard will be fine, physically." Before I could continue, the figure that was Bastian exploded. The only thing I could figure had happened was that he had mentally activated the self-destruct, and no doubt because the charges were on the small size, or a controlled type of explosion, the man exploded into a spray of blood. It had sprayed out in a small range, which Richard was on the outside ring of. Everyone else had avoided getting hit by it, but I could tell that I had been right about the statement I hadn't completed to Monet. Richard had opened his eyes and was raising a hand to his face. The expression on his face is what clued me in. It was emotionless, but he had noticed that Bastian was dead. I couldn't sense rage, sadness, or any other emotion from Richard. I chanced a glance at Yvette, and I could sense worry coming from her. Physically, Richard remained unhurt, but emotionally, he was a mess, and he wasn't letting anyone in. Monet St. Croix watched as Emma finished her part of the account. She had also sensed what Emma had mentioned that day, but she hadn't reflected on it much. She had been consumed by her own inner turmoil that day. Still, she appreciated Jean's reaction when the redhead gasped after hearing that. That must have been terrible for him to witness. I know he didn't actually see it, but still. In the back of Monet's mind, she heard a snide voice say, Not as horrible as it could have been. Besides, it put him in the right mindset. Monet wanted to verbally chastise the voice, but knew that would have looked odd. No one here knew that secret about her, and she wasn't ready to have it found out. Emma, however, had confirmed what that voice had said. That was what led to the breakdown, Jean. But we didn't know how severe it was until recently. She watched Emma lean forward, resting her elbows on the table. You see, we figured Richard was upset about everything that had happened, and that we needed to keep an eye on him. She heard Yvette pipe up at that statement. It had been my suggestion, since he seemed to be even shutting me out. I was worried that he might do something rash. Monet saw the same worry in Yvette's eyes at that moment, and saw they were the same as the day she suggested it. Again, the voice in the back of her mind spoke up in her head. We could have had her back with him as well that day, if you had let me do it. Again, Monet wanted to shout back at the voice in her head, but she knew she couldn't, not now. She saw Jean nod in understanding to Yvette's statement, and heard the woman ask the key question. I understand, but exactly how serious had it become at that point? Monet found herself answering the question, and became the center of attention to everyone there. Richard tried to take his own life. She almost regretted saying that, since while everyone was looking at her, the voice in the back of her mind was cackling. It was Scott Summers who asked the question she knew she'd have to give an incomplete answer to. How'd he try and do this? She felt like a deer in headlights now. She knew if she told everyone every detail of that day, she would have to expose her own dark secret. She also knew how it would affect the team, as well as her position in the team. Some relations, especially between her and Jubilation, were already on shaky ground. She sighed then, and responded with an honest answer. I don't think he truly wanted to go through with it, mind you. He had said once that drugs would kill him due to the medication he takes for epilepsy. She thought back to the day not so long ago, and said, I think he wanted to face death on his terms, although the method he was using would have killed him himself more than himself. She then started telling about that fateful day, leaving out details that the voice in her head would have loved to tell everyone.